here's the deal. When you get pulled over by the police and the police tell you to do something when the blue lights are on, you get back in the car.
We don't have
you
to
have to listen.
You're my servant.
No, we don't have to listen.
You have to listen to us.
You're not playing the...
I'm not playing, dude.
Yes,
we don't have...
I was out of my car when you pulled in. I was already out of my car going to get my mail.
Stop. We don't have to listen to you.
Yeah,
You're not gonna... Sit down. Sit down.
So what do you want from me?
Sit down on the bumper.
He's telling you what to do, so sit down.
Stop. Sit down.
Really?
No, what's really is you acting the way you're acting. We're sick of it. For 1 second, be quiet while I talk to you. You want to come chum us up when we're not doing law enforcement, then you act like this, a raging jerk, and with your buddy, stop interrupting me and shut your mouth.
Car, tries to go inside, doesn't listen to anything.
No, we're sick of your crap and the way you act. We're sick of it. Don't come pulling up to us anymore and acting like we're friends, and then pull this shit on traffic stop. We're done. You understand me? Don't pull up next to us anymore because you're two different people. When the lights come on, you're my servant. You do what I say. Then when
that's not what I said.
Yes, it is.
You said I don't have to listen to you.
Let's just start the paperwork and get it going, and then we'll get it.
The atmosphere was tense as the second officer chimed in, insisting that he hadn't gone through Stephen's wallet. Despite Stephen's calm composure, the officers' voices grew louder and more aggressive, each question laced with hostility. It was a gripping scene, filled with palpable tension and uncertainty.
You have your license?
Yeah, I was trying to get it, but I'm getting all roughed up.
We're not roughing you up.
Hey, over here, Mr. Bellows.
Sick of it. So, I didn't tell you, sit on the bumper. Listen, buddy.
Said you want the license.
Listen.
No, I'm
what fucking part of listen do you not understand?
What do you want me to do?
Did you not?
To listen.
I'm listening. What?
Keep your ass on the bumper and listen.
They tried walking away from you?
And he had a gun on him.
I was already out of the car before he pulled in.
But when I get out of the car and tell you...
Yeah,
and when I tell you to get back in your car...
What's going on?
I told you you're getting pulled over, get back in the car.
He's been escalating every time we've dealt with him
I'm
in the last month and a half.
Escalating.
What we're going to do with it.
How am I escalating?
Do you have a license on you? Yes or no?
Right in my wallet.
So can you...
You can find it.
I'm
not moving because I don't want to be grabbed.
Okay, so why didn't you stop when the deputy asked you to stop? Why'd you keep walking away?
I turned around and stood there, Blake.
But why didn't you...
I'll answer your question. I stood there and I said, he got out and he said, get in your car.
And why didn't
I said, what's up? But he's like, you're being pulled over. I'm like, for what?
But you
and then he comes up and grabs me and throws me on my car.
You were not thrown on the car.
Yes, you did.
It's all on camera.
But how come you wouldn't listen to his commands?
Deputy Pocket's frustration was palpable as he insisted that Stephen follow the rules set by the state of Vermont. Stephen, however, remained calm and assertive, stating that he wasn't breaking any laws. Despite Stephen's protests, the officer's focus had shifted. It was no longer about the law, but rather about asserting authority.
I walked towards him. I went to my car.
So
he asked. You're the one getting out.
We wouldn't touch anybody if they were doing what we asked them to do.
I was standing there and I walked to my car.
And to him, we're his servants. We're servants.
In the white thing, you are a public servant.
And we don't have to listen to you.
You don't have
Supreme
a license.
Court, as you know, has already ruled on a traffic stop. We don't have to listen to a word you say. There's a time and a place, which is court.
This is the only white thing.
I won't speak then. If I'm not listening, I won't speak.
What you said.
I'll exercise
Stephen
my
Bellows.
Stephen, what's your date of birth? Stephen, what's your date of birth?
All right, then buckle him up, take him to the office. He doesn't want to identify himself. We already know who he is.
We know who he is.
He's playing this. So the last couple of times he's been
Just start the paperwork, write everything.
So I'm telling you right now, don't pull up next to me and try and chum me up because I'm sick of your crap. Do you understand me? Do you see me on the side of the road? Do not come talk to me.
Stephen, do you have insurance for the car?
I have no
Stephen, enough is enough, okay? I stopped you for an inspection sticker violation. This is ridiculous. Do you have insurance for the car, yes or no? Is it in the car?
$12.
Do you give Corporal Allen permission to get it out?
Because he'll then
who's it through?
State Farm.
There we go.
The camera captures every moment, every unjustified action, and every dangerous admission. A chilling remark slips from one of the officers, revealing a two-faced nature and a chilling promise to treat the passenger differently. the atmosphere becomes heavy with the weight of the unspoken threat to something deeply personal.
And then I'm like, well, come back over here, and then back it all.
Well, I want some.
And then I saw the gun, so I was like, no, we're not playing this game.
And last time we dealt with him, he had a new guy with
yeah,
him
you're allowed
that
to carry,
was
but when
like
you're not
sovereign
listening
citizen.
to my commands.
No, it's sovereign citizen.
Oh, is this Albert?
Yeah, the guy that you stopped.
Yeah.
So this is him right here. And then, like 2 weeks later, he's showing me up like we're buddies, even though, which is fine.
I didn't even talk to you. I was talking to Blake.
But why wouldn't you listen to what he was telling you to do in the first place?
I did. I walked towards him. I said, "What's up?" I asked a question. You're being poor. I said, "For what?" Like I would if I was in my car.
Or did he ask you to sit in the car?
He asked me to go to the car, and I stood by the car, and then he grabbed me and pushed me in the car.
How many times did he ask you to get into the car?
Once.
Stephen's routine traffic stop takes a dark turn as the officer's threat escalates into a menacing game of intimidation, leaving Stephen caught in a dangerous power play where every move counts.
So when you act a certain way against us, then it escalates things. If you're cool with us, we're cool with you. But now lately you've been two-faced the last couple times I've dealt with you. So now we don't trust you, which is fine. But when you act a different way with
HRE 281.
But when you act this way a different way, then I see you outside, and then you're like, hey, how's it going? Or and then you try and be my buddy.
Because I'm not on a traffic stop.
It doesn't matter. We're doing a
the
job.
same way on a traffic stop or not. Just because we wear a uniform and we come in
Because
contact with you.
anything I say incriminates myself. It's a Fifth Amendment.
If you would have just followed what he told you, he probably would have just gave you a warning and sent you on your way. No, I think there's more to this because, like I said, I've known
What do you
deputy.
think?
I think you're
Can I
lying.
talk real quick? So every time I know Deputy Pocket pretty
Go
well.
through my whole car. Go for it.
We don't need to search your car. We're not even asking you to.
The encounter extended, shifting its focus from any potential violation to a demonstration of control. The legal firearm owned by Stephen emerged as the central element of the officer's intimidation efforts. Stephen maintained his composure despite one officer's attempt to rationalize their unjust behavior.
Said yourself that you treat us differently on traffic stops, so obviously we're going to treat people.
When I get pulled over, I don't speak anymore because it incriminates yourself.
But you have to
Did he only ask
I know
you
what
simple
my rights are. I've been reading law books.
Yeah,
I'm
we hear you.
exercising my rights.
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, then we're going to exercise our rights on our private time that we don't need to be friendly to people.
Well, yeah, you won't talk to me.
We're not going to because we hate two-faced people. And you just admitted on camera that you're two-faced. Because you treat us differently when we're just trying to provide for our families and keep it safe out here.
I'm just trying to survive.
Not even worth it. No, because this is the new him now, just so you're aware. I wouldn't give him 2 seconds of your time anymore.
Stephen was pulled over for a routine traffic stop. Still, things took a turn when Deputy Pocket unlawfully extended the stop by running the serial number on Stephen's revolver without legal basis. Stephen, frustrated by the overreach, tried to remind them that they couldn't just start chasing hunches and adding time to a stop.
Because of your hostile thing to make sure my fellow co-workers are safe, because you obviously can't be trusted. And you just admitted on our camera that you treat us differently when we're in uniform when we're not. So you're the one that shouldn't be trusted.
I don't treat anyone differently. I'm not going to speak to people on a traffic spot.
No, which is your legal right, but in turn, for me, I've known you for a long time, never had an issue with you, right?
That's the thing. I know you guys personally. I've always respected you guys. But when I was telling him the last time I pulled over, every time I go to New York, the more I say, I got a lawsuit done because they gave me 3 tickets that all got thrown out. They were all unlawful.
But we're not in New York.
Bad experience. I know, but it's the mindset. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard.
But that's like saying for us that we have to treat everybody the same because we have it bad. So like, I can't help you with that situation, but I've never had an issue with you. Always been friendly, talked with you, no issues.
I don't want a problem.
They prolonged the stop, latching onto the fact that I can't wear a gun into a federal building, even though I didn't go inside. The officer adds condescendingly, "I'm just educating you." The conversation is no longer about law. It's about humiliation. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Stephen, frustrated but still calm, takes their verbal lashings. Eventually, the officers slap him with a warning. No real violations, just a ticket for an inspection sticker and an unregistered car. In their eyes, Stephen is guilty of something, if not today, then tomorrow.
Do not have a right to disregard a lawful order. I wasn't here, but I also know Deputy Pocket.
Alright, it's just word against word, but I'm telling you, I just stood there. I didn't try to go in.
He was giving you
did he ask you
when
to
I was
step back in the
5 feet
car?
from the door,
Yep.
he pulled in and hit the siren. I
Yep.
turned around and I said, what's up? He's like, you're being pulled over. I'm like, okay. And I walk towards the car.
Yeah.
I'm like, for what? He's like, just go in the car. And I'm like, okay. And then he grabs me and puts me on the car.
So he was passively resisting when I got here, not listening and arguing. So he can say what he wants. If it's a fraction of what I saw, I know why Deputy Paquette did what he did.
It's a terrifying reminder of what happens when those sworn to protect instead use their power to intimidate, manipulate, and oppress. As the tense encounter draws to a close, Stephen, drained yet determined, makes a solemn promise to seek justice through legal means. With an unwavering resolve, he declares his intention to acquire all body camera footage. The officer's stoic expressions betray no...
And if somebody asks you for a license...
When he pulled me over in Albert, I gave him all my paperwork. I said, here you go. And he was asking me all these questions. I said, do you want to know where I'm going? I'm going to get my tobacco. I'm going home. I work 10 hours.
Yeah.
That's it. You guys want to drug test me, do everything?
Nobody's
I'm
asking.
straight as zero. I don't care.
All we're asking is we treated fairly.
And just so you're aware,
the part in the sandbar for drugs, there's nothing in there.
I'm pretty sure you can't wear a gun into a federal building.
You can't. So you just committed a federal
I
crime.
didn't go in there.
Just saying, I'm just educating.
How
I'm
close
not
was he
saying
into the
anything.
building with his firearm?
We're not accusing you, so don't say that we are. I'm just saying that, and future reference, if you're going to the post office, probably not.
I didn't see signage.
It's federal building. You can't.
Okay, well, I didn't see signage.
I'm just saying.
Thank you for letting me know. I didn't
Steven,
know.
That's just
I'm going to
prevent.
put your handgun on your passenger side seat. Do not touch the gun until we're gone. Do you understand?
Because you can get a federal offense for that.
I didn't know that.
People get uppity, well, mostly in the post office, stuff like that.
In their world, the concept of being held accountable is a rare occurrence. However, Stephen remains undeterred, fully aware that his decision to share his story is not just a personal battle, but a courageous stand against a pervasive and systemic issue. In the end, this isn't just Stephen's story. It's the story of countless Americans who find themselves on the wrong side of an officer's ego. It's a reminder that knowing your rights is just the first step. Exercising them? That's when the real fight begins. Was Stephen in the right? Were the officers justified in their actions?
The encounter begins in a space that should be routine and unremarkable. A brief roadside interaction framed as a minor traffic matter. Nothing about the setting signals danger. There is no report of violence, no urgent call, no allegation that would justify heightened force. And yet, within moments, the foundations of the encounter are quietly redefined. What follows is not a sudden explosion, but something more insidious. An accumulation of small decisions, each one bending the balance of power a few degrees further until the entire interaction tilts. From the very first seconds, the tone is set not by law, but by posture. Commands are issued before clarity is established. Instructions arrive without explanation, and when they are questioned, the response is not clarification but irritation. This is the first fault line. Policing, at its constitutional core, is not built on unquestioned obedience. It is built on lawful authority. That authority must be articulated, grounded, and justified. Here, it is implied, assumed to exist simply because a uniform is present. The citizen does not flee. He does not threaten. He does not interfere with evidence or endanger anyone. He stands, speaks, and asserts boundaries. These actions, while lawful, are treated as provocations. The distinction matters. A refusal to volunteer information is not obstruction. Silence is not resistance. Standing without consent to search is not defiance. Yet the officer's body language and cadence suggest that these rights are being interpreted as personal challenges. This is where the psychological pivot occurs. The encounter stops being about a traffic issue and begins to revolve around control. Control over movement, control over speech, control over posture. When an officer begins to frame compliance as respect and non-compliance as disrespect, the legal framework starts to erode. Respect is not a statutory requirement. Compliance must be tethered to lawful commands. Anything beyond that is discretionary authority masquerading as necessity. The citizen's assertion that officers are public servants is not merely rhetorical. It reflects a fundamental truth of democratic policing. Authority flows from the public, not the other way around. But within the encounter, this statement lands like an insult. The officer's response reveals a deeper tension, one that surfaces repeatedly in Bodycam footage across jurisdictions. When the identity of the officer becomes fused with the idea of unquestioned command, even lawful dissent can feel intolerable. As voices rise, interruptions increase. The exchange becomes less about information and more about dominance. Interrupting a speaker is a subtle but effective tactic. It destabilizes, frustrates, and reframes the interaction as disorderly, often creating the very agitation that will later be cited as justification for escalation. Each interruption chips away at mutual understanding and replaces it with friction. The officer attempts to reset the encounter through physical positioning, directing the citizen where to stand, how to sit, where to look. These commands are not accompanied by articulated safety concerns. They are not linked to a specific investigatory purpose. Instead, they function as tests. Will he comply? Will he submit? And when he does not immediately do so, the officer's language sharpens. At this stage, the concept of reasonable suspicion becomes critical. Reasonable suspicion must be based on specific, articulable facts that criminal activity is afoot. It cannot be retroactively manufactured from a citizen's demeanor or tone. Here, there is no new fact introduced, no furtive movement, no contradictory statement, no evidence of a crime. The only change is the officer's perception of being challenged. This is where authority shifts from legal to emotional. The officer's frustration becomes visible. The stop is no longer procedural, it is personal. And once an encounter becomes personal, the risk of misuse of authority increases dramatically. Policing demands emotional regulation precisely because officers wield asymmetrical power. When that regulation fails, the consequences are borne almost entirely by the citizen. The arrival of additional officers does not calm the situation, it compounds it. Backup, in theory, exists to enhance safety and oversight. In practice, it can also reinforce escalation through group dynamics. When multiple officers converge, there is an unspoken pressure to align narratives, to validate the initial officer's perception. Disagreement becomes less likely. De-escalation becomes harder. The citizen continues to assert his rights calmly. He does not raise his voice to match the officers. He does not attempt to flee. He does not physically resist. Yet, his refusal to engage in what he views as unlawful questioning is interpreted as hostility. This is a critical misinterpretation. Hostility, in a legal sense, requires more than verbal disagreement. It requires actions that threaten safety or obstruct lawful duties. Neither is present. Instead, we see the emergence of what can be called retaliation policing. The stop lengthens, the scope widens, questions multiply. The original purpose fades into the background. Time becomes a tool. Every additional minute serves not investigative necessity but leverage. The citizen is made to wait, to stand, to comply with shifting instructions. The message is clear: resistance, even lawful resistance, will be punished with inconvenience at best, force at worst. The mention of a firearm marks another turning point. The presence of a legally owned weapon, disclosed or discovered without threatening behavior, does not automatically justify seizure or extended detention. Courts have repeatedly held that lawful gun ownership alone does not create reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Yet here, the firearm becomes a focal point, not because it poses an immediate danger, but because it offers a new avenue for control. The officer's language changes again. safety is invoked, but selectively. The commands become more rigid. Physical proximity increases. Touch is introduced. Each of these actions raises the stakes. When an officer touches a citizen without clear legal justification, the line between command and force begins to blur. Even minimal physical contact can transform the legal analysis of the encounter. Throughout this phase, the citizen's behavior remains consistent. He questions, he explains. He resists unlawful commands verbally, not physically. This consistency matters. It undermines any later claim that the escalation was driven by unpredictable behavior. The volatility is not coming from the citizen. It is emerging from the officer's response to being challenged. The language used by the officers reveals a preoccupation with perceived attitude rather than objective conduct. Phrases implying that the citizen is playing games or acting differently suggest that the issue is not what he is doing, but how he is doing it. This is a dangerous metric. Policing based on attitude rather than action invites bias, subjectivity, and abuse. As the encounter progresses, we see a subtle inversion of roles. The citizen is framed as the problem to be managed rather than a person to be served. The officers speak about being sick of his behavior, not because it is unlawful, but because it is inconvenient to their authority. This is not law enforcement, it is authority enforcement. The threat of arrest enters the conversation not as a last resort, but as a disciplinary measure. Arrest becomes a way to end the debate, to reassert dominance, to silence dissent. This misuse of arrest power is particularly corrosive. The power to deprive someone of liberty is among the most severe tools the state possesses. Using it to resolve an ego conflict undermines public trust and constitutional order. The citizen's insistence on remaining silent is met with escalating pressure. Silence, however, is not suspicious. It is a protected right. The Fifth Amendment exists precisely to prevent the state from coercing self-incrimination. When officers treat silence as defiance, they invert the very principles they are sworn to uphold. By the end of this segment, the original justification for the stop is almost irrelevant. What remains is a struggle over authority. Who controls the narrative? Who dictates the terms? Who yields? The officer's focus has shifted entirely from enforcing traffic regulations to enforcing compliance with their expectations. This shift is subtle, but it is the engine driving everything that follows. What makes this encounter especially instructive is not a single explosive moment, but the cumulative effect of small overreaches. Each interruption, each unnecessary command, each extension of the stop adds weight. Individually, they might be dismissed as minor. Together, they form a pattern that transforms a routine stop into a confrontation laden with risk. This is how misuse of authority often unfolds, not through dramatic villainy, but through incremental decisions made in moments of irritation. Decisions that feel justified in the moment. Decisions that, when reviewed later, reveal a departure from lawful policing. The body camera captures not just actions, but mindset. And in this mindset, we see the seeds of what will soon become a far more serious escalation. The encounter stands at a precipice. The officers have not yet crossed the most consequential lines, but they are close. The legal thresholds are blurred. The emotional temperature is rising. And the systems designed to check this behavior, training, policy, supervision, are conspicuously absent in the moment. What follows will not be an accident. It will be the predictable outcome of everything that has already occurred. By the time this encounter moves into its second phase, the legal framework has already been destabilized. The stop no longer resembles a routine enforcement action. It has become a prolonged negotiation over authority itself. What is striking is not just what the officers do next, but why they do it. The motivations driving the interaction have quietly shifted away from public safety and toward something far more personal. The citizen is now operating under an unspoken but unmistakable condition. His behavior is being evaluated not against the law, but against the officer's expectations of deference. This is a critical distinction. Policing that hinges on perceived attitude rather than objective conduct becomes inherently unstable. It allows emotion to substitute for legal standards, and it creates space for escalation without cause. At this stage, the officers repeatedly frame their commands as safety-related. Safety, in policing, is a legitimate concern, but it must be tethered to articulable facts. Here, safety is invoked broadly, vaguely, and inconsistently. The citizen is told that his actions are unsafe, yet those actions remain unchanged from earlier moments when safety was not cited as an issue. This inconsistency reveals that safety is being used rhetorically, not diagnostically. The command to remain seated, to stay in a specific position, to stop speaking. These directives are layered atop one another with increasing urgency. None are explained in terms of a specific threat. Instead, the justification seems to be cumulative frustration. The officers appear less concerned with what the citizen might do than with the fact that he is not doing what they want, in the manner they want, at the pace they want. This is where the power imbalance becomes most visible. The citizen's options are narrowing, not because the law requires it, but because the officer's tolerance has diminished. Compliance is no longer about resolving the stop. It is about placating authority. Each refusal, however lawful, results in harsher language, closer physical proximity, and more aggressive tone. Physical contact, even minimal, changes everything. When an officer touches a citizen during a stop, the encounter crosses into a different legal and psychological category. Touch communicates dominance. It signals that the officer is prepared to escalate beyond verbal control. In this case, the touch is not preceded by a clear warning or explanation tied to officer safety. It appears reactive, not preventative. The officers begin to narrate the citizen's behavior in a way that reframes the situation retroactively. Words like escalating, problematic, and not listening are repeated. This narrative construction is significant. It lays the groundwork for justification, both in the moment and later, should the encounter be reviewed. By labeling the citizen as the source of escalation, the officers insulate themselves from scrutiny, even as their own conduct intensifies. What is notably absent is any attempt at de-escalation. There is no pause, no reset, no effort to lower voices or clarify misunderstandings. De-escalation training emphasizes slowing down, creating space, and recentering on the original purpose of the stop. None of that occurs here. Instead, the officers accelerate, feeding off each other's frustration. The presence of multiple officers reinforces this dynamic. Once several uniforms are involved, the interaction takes on a performative quality. Authority is no longer just being exercised, it is being displayed. The officers speak not only to the citizen, but to each other, reinforcing a shared stance. This collective posture makes retreat, legal or emotional, more difficult. The citizen's continued calmness becomes paradoxically threatening. He does not provide the emotional release that the officer's frustration seems to seek. He does not shout or lash out, which might have justified immediate force. Instead, he remains composed, articulate, and firm. This composure undermines the officer's narrative of danger and disorder, increasing their irritation. Silence, when invoked by the citizen, further destabilizes the officer's control. Silence denies them information, but more importantly, it denies them engagement. Policing often relies on conversational dominance, asking questions, eliciting responses, steering dialogue. When a citizen lawfully opts out of this dynamic, the officer must rely strictly on the law. Here, that reliance appears uncomfortable. The officers respond by broadening the scope of inquiry. Questions multiply, touching on topics increasingly removed from the original stop. This is a classic sign of an unlawfully extended detention. The Supreme Court has been clear that a traffic stop may not be prolonged beyond the time reasonably required to address the violation that justified it, absent new reasonable suspicion. Yet, no new suspicion is articulated. Instead, the stop stretches on, justified by the citizen's behavior. This is a dangerous precedent. Behavior that consists of asserting rights, remaining silent, or questioning authority cannot lawfully extend a stop. To allow otherwise would effectively nullify those rights, turning them into triggers for punishment. The firearm re-enters the narrative as a point of fixation. The officers treat its presence as inherently suspicious, despite its legality. This conflation of lawful possession with danger is a recurring issue in bodycam footage nationwide. It reflects a broader institutional discomfort with armed citizens who are knowledgeable about their rights. The gun becomes less a safety concern and more a symbol, a tangible reminder that the citizen retains autonomy. The officer's language around the firearm suggests a search for leverage. References to rules, buildings, and hypothetical violations are introduced, not to address an imminent issue, but to reassert control. The implication is clear. Even if the original stop yields nothing, something else can always be found. This tactic, sometimes called fishing, is antithetical to constitutional policing. The Fourth Amendment was designed precisely to prevent the state from rummaging through a person's life in search of wrongdoing. Yet here, the officer's frustration appears to justify exactly that approach. As the encounter drags on, fatigue sets in. Not physical fatigue, but cognitive and emotional fatigue. This is another subtle form of pressure. The longer the stop lasts, the more likely the citizen is to make a mistake, to comply out of exhaustion, or to abandon his rights for the sake of ending the ordeal. Time becomes a coercive tool. The officers begin to reference past interactions, framing the citizen as a recurring problem. This historical framing is deeply problematic. Each stop must stand on its own legal footing. Past disagreements do not create present reasonable suspicion. Yet the officers speak as though a pattern of non-deference justifies present escalation. This is retaliation logic, plain and simple. The citizen is being punished not for what he is doing now, but for how he has behaved before. Such logic erodes the principle of equal treatment under the law. It transforms policing into a personalized system of rewards and punishments based on compliance history. The emotional temperature peaks when threats of further action are implied. The possibility of arrest looms, not because of a clearly defined offense, but because the officers are done with the situation. This language is revealing. It signals that the encounter has exceeded their patience, not that it has met a legal threshold. Throughout this phase, the citizen continues to articulate his understanding of the law. He references rights, procedures, and boundaries. Whether every assertion is perfectly phrased is beside the point. What matters is that he is engaging in protected conduct, speech, silence, and refusal to consent. The officer's hostility toward these actions underscores a fundamental misunderstanding or rejection of constitutional limits. By the end of Part 2, the encounter has fully transformed. What began as a minor traffic issue is now a prolonged standoff over authority. The officers have invested too much pride to disengage easily. The citizen has invested too much dignity to capitulate. The system, which should intervene through policy and training, remains silent. The conditions are now set for the most consequential decisions yet to come. The officers have framed the citizen as uncooperative. The citizen has framed the officers as overreaching. Neither side has de-escalated. The legal justifications are thin, the emotional stakes are high, and the tools of state power, detention, seizure, arrest, are all within reach. What happens next will not be sudden or inexplicable. It will be the logical outcome of every small choice made so far. The misuse of authority does not announce itself. It accumulates. And as this encounter moves toward its final phase, the consequences of that accumulation are about to become unmistakable. The final phase of this encounter unfolds not with a dramatic rupture, but with a quiet, dangerous normalization of overreach. By now, the officer's authority has detached almost entirely from the original justification for the stop. What remains is a self-sustaining confrontation, driven by irritation, familiarity, and a belief that compliance should be automatic, even when the law does not require it. The officer's language becomes increasingly retrospective. They speak about prior encounters, past frustrations, and perceived patterns of behavior. This backward-looking focus is significant. It reveals that the present stop is no longer being evaluated on its own merits. Instead, it is being used as an opportunity to settle an ongoing dispute over control and respect. In constitutional policing, this is a critical failure. The law does not recognize cumulative annoyance as probable cause. The citizen, meanwhile, is caught in a narrowing corridor of options. Each attempt to explain his actions is dismissed as argument. Each assertion of rights is reframed as obstinance. Even cooperation, handing over documents, remaining present, answering required questions, is overshadowed by the officer's fixation on what he is not doing. Deferring. This fixation produces a subtle but powerful shift in the officer's internal logic. They begin to treat lawful behavior as suspicious precisely because it is deliberate. The citizen's composure, his measured tone, his insistence on procedure, all are interpreted as calculated. This interpretation is deeply flawed. Calmness is not deceit. Knowledge is not guilt. Yet, within the encounter, these traits become aggravating factors. The discussion of the firearm escalates again, this time with greater specificity. References are made to buildings, regulations, and hypothetical violations. The implication is that the citizen has narrowly avoided committing a serious offense, or may have already done so. This implication carries enormous weight, even when unsupported. It transforms the tone of the encounter from corrective to punitive. What is particularly troubling is how these references are delivered. They are not framed as neutral explanations or warnings. They are framed as leverage. The officers speak as though they are educating, but the cadence suggests admonishment. The message is not, "Here is the law," but "You are fortunate we are not taking this further." This is a classic hallmark of authority misuse, the invocation of discretion as a favor. Discretion, when exercised properly, is meant to serve justice, to allow leniency, context, and proportionality. When wielded as a threat, it becomes coercive. It signals that rights exist only at the pleasure of the officer. The stop continues to stretch beyond its lawful scope. Time passes without new justification. The officers remain engaged, questioning, admonishing, and lecturing. Each additional minute deepens the constitutional violation. Prolonged detention without reasonable suspicion is not a technicality. It is a substantive breach of liberty. The citizen's frustration becomes more visible, not explosive, but weary. This is an important distinction. He does not lash out. He does not threaten. He does not resist physically. Instead, he he shows the strain of being held in a liminal state, neither free to go nor formally arrested, neither accused nor cleared. This limbo is itself a form of pressure. The officers interpret this fatigue as confirmation of their narrative. To them, his visible irritation validates their belief that he is difficult. This circular reasoning is self-reinforcing. The more the stop drags on, the more frustrated the citizen becomes. The more frustrated he becomes, the more justified the officers feel in continuing. At this stage, the legal analysis is stark. The original purpose of the stop has been addressed. Any citation or warning could have been issued long ago. There is no new reasonable suspicion articulated. The continued detention serves no investigatory purpose. It serves only the officer's desire to assert dominance and extract acknowledgement of authority. The mention of recording, of body cameras capturing the interaction, introduces a moment of irony. Body cameras are intended to promote accountability and transparency. Here, their presence does not deter escalation. Instead, it seems to embolden the officer's narrative construction. They speak as though the camera will validate their version of events, even as their actions drift further from constitutional norms. This confidence reflects a deeper institutional issue. When officers believe that their interpretation of compliance will be privileged over citizens' rights, accountability mechanisms lose their deterrent effect. The camera becomes a witness, but not necessarily a check. As the encounter nears its conclusion, the officers finally begin to disengage. Not because the law demands it, but because the confrontation has reached a point of diminishing returns. A warning is issued. The ostensible reason for the stop is invoked once more, almost as an afterthought. This procedural closure does not erase what has occurred. It merely ends the immediate exercise of power. The warning itself is revealing. It functions less as a corrective measure and more as a symbolic assertion. We could have done more, but chose not to. This framing reinforces the imbalance. The citizen is left with the understanding that his freedom was contingent, not guaranteed, that it depended on the officer's restraint rather than his rights. The discussion around future behavior is particularly telling. The officers imply that continued assertion of rights will lead to continued problems. This is an implicit threat. It suggests that lawful conduct will be met with heightened scrutiny, longer stops, and increased risk. Such implications chill the exercise of constitutional rights, undermining their practical value. The citizen responds not with capitulation, but with resolve. He speaks of documentation, of obtaining footage, of pursuing formal channels. This response is significant. It shifts the arena of accountability from the roadside to the institutional level. It is a reminder that while an individual officer may wield immediate power, that power is not absolute. The officer's reactions to this resolve are mixed. There is defensiveness, justification, and minimization. They frame their actions as reasonable, necessary, and misunderstood. This defensive posture is common in cases of perceived authority challenge. It reflects a belief that good intentions absolve questionable conduct, but intention is not the standard. The law evaluates actions, not feelings. An officer may feel disrespected and still be required to act within constitutional bounds. This is the burden of authority. It is also its defining constraint. As the encounter ends, the emotional residue lingers. The citizen is released, but not restored. The officers return to their duties, but not to reflection. The imbalance remains unresolved. This is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the interaction, its ordinariness. There is no dramatic arrest, no viral moment of violence, just a prolonged, tense stop that leaves one party drained and the other unchallenged. This ordinariness is precisely what makes the case important. Most abuses of authority do not occur in extremes. They occur in gray areas, in extended stops, in unnecessary commands, in retaliatory questioning. They occur when officers conflate compliance with respect and treat dissent as disorder. The system's failure here is not just individual, but structural. Training emphasizes officer safety, but often inadequately addresses the psychological impact of being challenged. Policies outline constitutional limits, but enforcement of those limits is inconsistent. Supervisory review may focus on outcomes, citations, arrests, rather than processes. In such an environment, encounters like this can recur without consequence. The citizen's experience becomes part of a larger pattern. Each similar stop reinforces an informal lesson. Asserting rights carries a cost. Over time, this lesson shapes behavior, not just of individuals but of communities. People learn when to speak, when to stay silent, when to avoid interaction altogether. This erosion of trust is cumulative and difficult to reverse. The final moments of the encounter offer no catharsis. There is no acknowledgement of error, no recalibration of tone. The officer's authority remains intact, unexamined. The citizen's dignity remains intact as well, but at a price: time, stress, and the lingering knowledge that the law did not protect him as fully as it should have. What this encounter ultimately exposes is the fragility of constitutional rights in everyday policing. Rights exist on paper, but their enforcement depends on restraint, professionalism, and institutional culture. When those elements falter, even knowledgeable, composed citizens can find themselves trapped in prolonged, coercive interactions. This is not a story of villains and heroes. It is a story of systems and incentives, of how power, once challenged, can harden, of how discretion, once unmoored from principle, can become punitive, and of how accountability, when delayed or absent, allows patterns to persist. As the camera stops recording and the roadside returns to quiet, the implications extend far beyond this single stop. The encounter becomes a data point, a piece of evidence in an ongoing conversation about policing, authority, and the lived reality of constitutional rights. It asks not whether the officers believed they were right, but whether the system ensured that being right mattered. The answer, in this case, remains unresolved, and that unresolved tension between authority and accountability, between power and restraint, is where the true significance of this encounter lies. In the aftermath of the stop, what lingers is not a citation or a warning, but a residue of unresolved authority. The roadside has returned to normal, yet the encounter continues to exist, in memory, in documentation, and in the institutional machinery that will later decide whether anything that happened truly matters. This final phase is not about action, but about consequence. Not about commands, but about what those commands reveal when the pressure is gone. What becomes immediately apparent is how quickly the officers move to normalize their conduct once the encounter winds down. Their language softens slightly, not in acknowledgement of error, but in a recalibration of tone now that control has been reasserted. This shift is subtle, but important. It signals that the confrontation was never about safety in the objective sense. It was about establishing hierarchy. Once that hierarchy is no longer contested, the urgency dissipates. The citizen, meanwhile, is left to process the encounter without closure. He was not arrested for a serious crime. He was not found to be in violation of anything that justified the duration and intensity of the stop. Yet he was subjected to extended detention, physical handling, raised voices, and implicit threats. This is a uniquely destabilizing outcome. There is no formal charge to contest, no clear resolution to appeal, only the knowledge that something went wrong. This kind of encounter occupies a gray zone that often escapes accountability. It is severe enough to be traumatic, yet subtle enough to be dismissed. When reviewed internally, it may be framed as a heated interaction or a communication issue. These euphemisms are telling. They sanitize power imbalances and recast coercion as misunderstanding. The officer's reliance on discretion becomes more explicit in their closing remarks. Discretion is presented as benevolence, as though restraint were a favor rather than a requirement. This framing reverses the moral logic of policing. The law does not grant officers permission to act arbitrarily with the option to be kind. It grants limited authority, bounded by rights, with discretion serving as a mechanism for fairness, not domination. The suggestion that future encounters will depend on the citizen's attitude carries long-term implications. It creates a conditional relationship with the law. Compliance and friendliness are rewarded with leniency. Assertiveness is punished with scrutiny. This conditionality undermines equal protection. It teaches citizens that rights are negotiable, contingent on tone and demeanor. From an institutional perspective, this is where patterns are formed. Officers remember faces, names, prior interactions. Without strict safeguards, this memory becomes bias. Each subsequent stop is filtered through past irritation. The citizen is no longer just a driver. He is that guy. This informal labeling system operates outside policy manuals, yet it powerfully shapes behavior. The citizen's intention to pursue documentation and formal review introduces a different timeline, one that unfolds slowly and often invisibly. Requests for footage, internal affairs complaints, public records inquiries. These processes are procedural, methodical, and frequently discouraging. They demand persistence, legal literacy, and emotional endurance. Many citizens never pursue them, not because the encounter was acceptable, but because the cost of accountability feels too high. This disparity is central to understanding why encounters like this recur. The immediate cost to the officer for overreach is often minimal. The delayed cost to the citizen, stress, time, legal fees, emotional toll, is substantial. When incentives are misaligned this way, restraint becomes optional rather than habitual. The body camera footage, while invaluable, is not self-executing accountability. It does not interpret itself. It does not assign responsibility. Its impact depends entirely on who reviews it, under what standards, and with what institutional priorities. If reviewers are inclined to defer to officer judgment absent overt misconduct, the footage becomes archival rather than corrective. This raises a deeper question about the culture surrounding authority. Policing institutions often emphasize solidarity, loyalty, and trust within the ranks. These values can be essential for safety, but they can also inhibit critical self-examination. When solidarity hardens into defensiveness, misconduct is reframed as misunderstanding, and accountability is perceived as betrayal. In this encounter, the absence of an internal check is striking. No supervisor intervenes in real time. No officer suggests de-escalation. No one reframes the interaction back to its lawful scope. This silence is not accidental, it is learned. It reflects a shared understanding of acceptable behavior, even when that behavior skirts constitutional boundaries. The citizen's experience illustrates how rights are tested not in courtrooms, but in moments of fatigue and pressure. Knowing one's rights is not enough. Exercising them requires composure under stress, clarity amid confusion, and resilience in the face of authority. Even then, the outcome is uncertain. Rights asserted do not always translate into rights respected. The officer's parting explanations, offered as education, carry an undertone of correction. They are not mutual exchanges of understanding, but lectures delivered from a position of dominance. This reinforces the imbalance one final time, ensuring that the last word belongs to authority. The citizen is informed, but not heard. As the encounter concludes, the narrative diverges. For the officers, it becomes another stop. A frustrating one, perhaps, but unremarkable. For the citizen, it becomes a reference point, a moment that informs future interactions, shapes expectations, and alters trust. This asymmetry in impact is rarely acknowledged in official assessments, yet it defines the lived reality of policing. The broader implications extend beyond this individual case. Encounters like this accumulate across communities, forming a collective memory. Stories are shared, warnings exchanged, behaviors adapted. People learn when to avoid eye contact, when to say as little as possible, when to comply beyond what the law requires simply to minimize risk. This adaptive behavior is rational, but it comes at the cost of civic engagement and mutual trust. Institutional accountability mechanisms often struggle to capture this cumulative harm. Metrics focus on arrests, citations, use of force incidents. Prolonged detentions, verbal intimidation, and retaliatory scrutiny are harder to quantify. Yet these are the interactions that most shape public perception. They are the everyday experiences that define whether policing feels protective or predatory. The citizen's resolve to seek justice represents a counterforce to this erosion. It is an assertion that the encounter matters, that it deserves scrutiny, not dismissal. Whether that scrutiny yields change is uncertain, but the act of documentation itself is significant. It transforms a private ordeal into a public record. This transformation is where power begins to rebalance, not immediately and not without resistance, but gradually. Documentation challenges narrative control. It introduces evidence into spaces that might otherwise rely on assumption. It creates the possibility, however slim, of accountability. Yet, even here, the burden remains uneven. The citizen must invest time, energy, and emotional labor to pursue redress. The officers continue their duties uninterrupted. This imbalance underscores a fundamental truth. Accountability in policing is often reactive rather than preventive. It addresses harm after it occurs, rather than restructuring incentives to prevent it. As the camera's final frames fade, the encounter settles into ambiguity. There is no definitive resolution, no clear vindication. Just an open question about what authority means in practice, and who bears the cost when it is misused. The significance of this encounter lies not in its extremity, but in its familiarity. It is a portrait of how authority can drift, how discretion can harden, and how rights can be tested without being overtly violated in ways that trigger immediate correction. It is a reminder that the most consequential moments in policing are often the quiet ones, the extended stops, the unnecessary commands, the retaliatory tone. In the end, the story does not belong solely to the officers or the citizen. It belongs to the system that shaped their interaction, a system that grants power with the expectation of restraint, a system that relies on professionalism to bridge the gap between authority and liberty, and a system that must reckon with what happens when that bridge begins to crack.